You sit there, drowning in the weight of your own mind, believing that salvation lies in the next therapy session, the next medication, the next spiritual retreat that promises to heal what feels irreparably broken within you. But what if I told you that every attempt to fix yourself through external means has been nothing more than an elaborate dance around the very truth that could set you free? What if the psychological suffering you experience, the anxiety that grips your chest like iron claws, the depression that feels like carrying stones in your soul, what if all of this is not a disease to be cured, but a call to become something greater than you have ever imagined possible? I am Friedrich Nietzsche, and I have walked through the valleys of psychological torment that would break lesser spirits. I have felt the crushing weight of migraine headaches that lasted for days, the isolation that comes from thinking thoughts too dangerous for the comfortable minds of my contemporaries, and the profound loneliness of seeing truths that others refuse to acknowledge. Yet it was precisely through this suffering that I discovered the most revolutionary approach to mental and emotional health that the world has ever known, not through the elimination of pain, but through its transformation into power, not through the numbing of consciousness, but through its radical intensification. You have been taught to see your psychological struggles as symptoms to suppress, emotions to manage, thoughts to control. But what if everything you have been told about mental health has been a lie designed to keep you weak, dependent, and forever seeking external solutions to what can only be resolved through the magnificent act of self-creation? What if your anxiety is not a disorder, but your spirit demanding that you stop living beneath your potential? What if your depression is not chemical imbalance, but your soul's rebellion against a life that dishonors your deepest nature? The conventional approaches to mental health treat you like a machine with broken parts, rather than a conscious being capable of transforming the very foundations of your existence. They offer you medications that numb your capacity to feel deeply, therapies that help you adjust to a sick society rather than transcend it, and spiritual practices that encourage you to escape reality, rather than transform it through the sheer force of your will. But I offer you something far more dangerous and infinitely more powerful. I offer you the tools to become the author of your own psychological reality. Listen carefully to what I am about to reveal, for it will challenge every assumption you hold about healing, growth, and human potential. The psychological hack that rebuilds your health is not found in any external technique or system. It lies in your willingness to embrace what I call the revaluation of all values, the courageous act of questioning every belief, every assumption, every inherited pattern of thinking that has contributed to your current state of suffering. It requires you to become what I term the overman, not through mystical transformation, but through the deliberate reconstruction of your relationship to pain, meaning, and personal power. Before we dive deeper into this revolutionary approach, I want you to engage with me in a way that will amplify the power of what you are about to learn. Comment below and tell me one specific area where you feel psychologically stuck, where traditional approaches have failed you, where you sense that something deeper than surface-level healing is required. Use this format to make it easy for yourself to share authentically with our community. Write something like, Friedrich, I struggle most with the feeling that I am not living up to my potential, and it manifests as constant anxiety about my choices. Or perhaps the area where I feel most stuck is in breaking free from patterns of self-doubt that seem to run my life despite years of trying different healing methods. When you share your truth in the comments, you accomplish two vital things. First, you practice the courage required for the philosophical transformation I am about to teach you, the willingness to look directly at what has been hiding in the shadows of your consciousness. Second, you contribute to a community of individuals who understand that true healing requires more than positive thinking and surface-level adjustments. Every comment becomes a testament to the human capacity for honest self-examination, and reading the experiences of others will show you that you are not alone in recognizing that conventional approaches to mental health often fall short of addressing the deeper philosophical questions that drive psychological suffering. Now, let us examine what I call the genealogy of your psychological pain. Most of what you experience as mental and emotional distress originates not from chemical imbalances or random neurological misfiring, but from what I term slave morality, a system of values that teaches you to see yourself as victim rather than creator, as someone who reacts to life rather than someone who actively shapes reality through conscious choice and unwavering will. This slave morality infiltrates your thinking from the earliest age, teaching you that your worth depends on external approval, that your happiness should be contingent on circumstances beyond your control, that your power lies in accommodating rather than asserting, in fitting in rather than standing out. Consider how this manifests in childhood. The sensitive child who feels everything deeply is taught that emotional intensity is problematic rather than powerful. The child who questions authority is labeled as difficult rather than celebrated for independent thinking. The child who refuses to conform to social expectations is medicated rather than encouraged to develop their unique gifts. These early experiences create what I call resentment, a deep-seated resentment toward life itself that masquerades as depression, anxiety, and various forms of psychological dysfunction. In adulthood, this slave morality continues to operate beneath the surface of consciousness, creating patterns that seem impossible to break through conventional therapeutic methods. You find yourself people-pleasing even when it contradicts your deeper values, because you learned early that love is conditional on compliance. You experience anxiety in social situations because you have internalized the belief that being authentically yourself risks rejection and abandonment. You struggle with decision-making because you have never learned to trust your own judgment over the opinions of others. You feel empty and purposeless because you have spent so much energy trying to be who others wanted you to be that you have lost connection with your own vital essence. The symptoms you experience in your journey toward mental and emotional health reflect this fundamental disconnect from your authentic power. When you meditate, you find your mind racing with worries and judgments, because you have never learned to distinguish between thoughts that serve your highest development and thoughts that perpetuate your psychological imprisonment. When you practice positive affirmations, they feel hollow and unconvincing because they contradict the deeper beliefs you hold about yourself and reality. When you engage in therapy, you make progress on surface issues, while the underlying philosophical framework that generates your suffering remains unchanged. Modern neuroscience validates what I intuited over a century ago about the relationship between belief systems and psychological health. Research shows that individuals who hold what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that they have significant influence over their life outcomes, demonstrate greater resilience, lower rates of depression and anxiety, and faster recovery from traumatic experiences. Studies on neuroplasticity reveal that conscious practices designed to challenge limiting beliefs can literally rewire the brain's neural networks, creating new pathways that support psychological well-being. This scientific evidence supports my assertion that psychological transformation requires more than symptom management. It requires what I call the will to power applied to the realm of consciousness itself. But how do you begin this process of philosophical transformation? How do you move from being a passive recipient of your psychological experience to becoming the active creator of your mental and emotional reality? The answer lies in understanding what I call eternal recurrence applied to psychological healing. This means learning to approach every moment of suffering, every episode of anxiety or depression, every experience of emotional pain as an opportunity to practice a fundamentally different relationship to difficulty. Instead of asking, "How do I make this feeling go away?" you learn to ask, "How do I transform this experience into something that strengthens my capacity for conscious living?" This requires developing what I call amor fati, love of fate, which in psychological terms means cultivating the ability to find meaning and growth potential in every experience, including and especially those experiences that feel most challenging. When anxiety arises, instead of immediately reaching for techniques to calm yourself, you first ask what this anxiety might be trying to communicate about areas where you are living beneath your authentic potential. When depression emerges, before attempting to shift your mood through external means, you explore whether this emotional state might be your psyche's way of signaling that current life circumstances no longer align with your deepest values and aspirations. The method I offer integrates the philosophical insights of self-overcoming with practical approaches that honor the complexity of human psychology. Unlike conventional therapy that focuses primarily on adjusting to existing circumstances, my approach emphasizes what I call active nihilism, the deliberate destruction of limiting beliefs and value systems that no longer serve your evolution, followed by the creative construction of new meaning frameworks that support your highest development. This process requires what I term philosophical courage, the willingness to question everything you have been taught about yourself and reality, even when such questioning initially increases rather than decreases psychological discomfort. The foundation of this transformative work lies in understanding that most psychological suffering stems from what I call the contradiction between your essential nature and the roles you play to gain social acceptance. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you pretend to agree when you actually disagree, every time you minimize your gifts to avoid threatening others, you create internal conflict that manifests as anxiety, depression, and various forms of emotional distress. The path to psychological freedom requires learning to honor your authentic responses even when doing so challenges the expectations of others. This does not mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate. Rather, it means developing the sophisticated capacity to be genuinely yourself while simultaneously considering the impact of your choices on others. It means learning to set boundaries that protect your essential nature while remaining open to growth and feedback. It means cultivating the strength to stand alone when necessary while also building genuine connections with others who appreciate authenticity over conformity. The practice of philosophical self-examination becomes a daily discipline, not unlike physical exercise but focused on developing psychological and spiritual strength rather than muscular fitness. Each morning you begin by asking yourself what inherited beliefs or automatic reaction patterns might be limiting your ability to respond to life with full consciousness and intentional choice. Throughout the day, you practice what I call conscious interruption, the skill of pausing between stimulus and response to consider whether your typical reaction serves your highest development or merely perpetuates familiar patterns of psychological limitation. When you encounter situations that typically trigger anxiety or emotional reactivity, instead of immediately engaging coping strategies designed to reduce discomfort, you first explore what this reaction reveals about your current relationship to power, authenticity, and self-creation. You begin to see that much of what you experience as psychological dysfunction actually represents your spirit's attempt to break free from constraining circumstances and limiting beliefs. The energy behind anxiety often contains the raw material for courage. The depth of depressive feelings often reflects your soul's capacity for profound meaning and connection. This philosophical approach to mental health requires patience and persistence because it challenges not only personal patterns but also cultural assumptions about the nature of healing and growth. You live in a society that profits from your psychological dependence, that benefits when you believe external solutions are required for internal problems. Pharmaceutical companies make money when you see emotional distress as medical condition requiring ongoing treatment. Therapy industries thrive when you believe professional intervention is necessary for personal growth. Spiritual teachers gain followers when you think enlightenment comes through their guidance rather than your own philosophical investigation. My approach threatens these systems because it returns power to where it rightfully belongs in your own capacity for conscious self-creation. It requires you to become what I call a free spirit, someone who takes full responsibility for their psychological experience while simultaneously recognizing the social and cultural factors that influence mental and emotional health. This balance between personal responsibility and social awareness prevents the spiritual bypassing that characterizes many self-help approaches while also avoiding the victim mentality that can emerge from purely external explanations of psychological suffering. The integration of Nietzschean philosophy with practical psychology creates a unique framework for healing that honors both individual empowerment and collective wisdom. You learn to question authority while respecting genuine expertise. You develop the strength to stand apart from social conditioning while maintaining the capacity for meaningful relationship and community connection. You cultivate the courage to challenge limiting beliefs while remaining humble about the ongoing nature of psychological and spiritual development. As you begin to implement this approach, you may notice that initial changes feel subtle rather than dramatic. This is because philosophical transformation occurs at the level of meaning and value rather than merely emotional or behavioral adjustment. The first shifts often involve increased clarity about what truly matters to you, greater awareness of when you are acting from authenticity versus social conditioning, and a growing sense of your own capacity to influence your psychological experience through conscious choice and deliberate practice. Over time, these foundational changes create ripple effects that transform every area of your life. Relationships become more genuine because you attract people who appreciate your authenticity rather than your compliance. Work becomes more fulfilling because you make career choices based on alignment with your values rather than external pressure or financial security alone. Creative expression flows more freely because you no longer filter your ideas through fears about judgment or rejection. Physical health often improves because stress decreases when you stop exhausting yourself trying to be someone you are not. The journey I describe requires tremendous courage because it asks you to give up the security of conventional approaches to mental health in favor of a path that empowers you completely while also requiring you to take full responsibility for your psychological development. There are no guarantees except this one: if you commit to the philosophical examination of your beliefs, values, and assumptions about yourself and reality, if you develop the strength to live authentically even when doing so feels risky or uncomfortable, if you learn to transform suffering into wisdom through the disciplined practice of conscious self-creation, you will discover psychological freedom that no external circumstance can diminish. This is not positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is the most practical approach to mental health that exists, because it addresses the philosophical foundations that generate psychological experience, rather than merely managing symptoms or adjusting to limiting circumstances. It requires you to become actively engaged in your own healing, rather than passively receiving treatment from others. It demands that you develop internal resources that cannot be taken away by changing external conditions. The path forward begins with a simple but profound commitment to truth-telling, first with yourself and then with others. You start by acknowledging the areas where you have been living beneath your potential, where you have accepted limitations that contradict your deepest knowing, where you have allowed fear to make decisions that properly belong to courage and wisdom. This honest assessment becomes the foundation for everything that follows, the solid ground upon which you build a new relationship to psychological health and personal power. From this foundation of self-honesty, you begin the daily practice of value examination, regularly questioning whether your current choices align with what you most deeply value, or merely reflect inherited patterns and social conditioning. You develop the skill of conscious responding, rather than automatic reacting, creating space between stimulus and response, where genuine choice becomes possible. You cultivate the strength to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort, while remaining committed to growth and authenticity, rather than comfort and security. I understand that this journey requires more courage than most people believe they possess. I know that choosing philosophical transformation over conventional adjustment feels overwhelming when you are already struggling with anxiety, depression, or other forms of psychological distress. But I also know that within every individual lies the capacity for self-overcoming that can transform any circumstance into an opportunity for greater strength, wisdom, and authentic living. The community you join by subscribing to this channel consists of individuals who understand that true healing requires more than surface-level adjustments, who recognize that psychological freedom comes through philosophical investigation rather than external manipulation, who are committed to supporting each other in the challenging but ultimately liberating work of conscious self-creation. When you subscribe and engage with this content, you declare your intention to take full responsibility for your psychological development, while also connecting with others who share your commitment to authentic transformation. Every video I create offers practical applications of philosophical principles that can revolutionize your relationship to mental and emotional health. You will learn specific techniques for identifying and challenging limiting beliefs, detailed methods for cultivating psychological strength and resilience, and concrete strategies for living authentically in a world that often rewards conformity over creativity. But more than techniques, you will develop the philosophical foundation that makes lasting transformation possible, the deep understanding of human nature that allows you to navigate any psychological challenge with wisdom and strength. Like this video if you are ready to acknowledge that conventional approaches to mental health have been insufficient for addressing your deepest needs for meaning, purpose, and authentic self-expression. Subscribe if you are committed to exploring philosophical approaches to psychological transformation that honor your capacity for self-creation while providing practical tools for navigating the challenges of conscious living. Your engagement with this content signals your readiness to begin the most important journey possible, the journey from psychological victimhood to conscious authorship of your own experience. Remember that every step you take toward authentic self-expression, every moment you choose courage over comfort, every time you honor your deepest values rather than external expectations, you contribute to your own healing, while also modeling psychological freedom for others who are ready to begin their own journey of philosophical transformation. Your commitment to this work becomes a gift not only to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch through the power of authentic living. The time has come to stop seeking external solutions to internal questions, to cease depending on others for validation that can only come from within, to end the exhausting effort to fix yourself through methods that treat symptoms rather than addressing philosophical foundations. Your psychological health awaits your decision to become the conscious creator of your own experience, to embrace the magnificent responsibility of self-overcoming, to transform every challenge into an opportunity for greater wisdom and strength. The choice is yours, and the power has always been yours. The question is whether you are finally ready to claim it.